I've been waiting to do this one for a long time. Raissa is one of the OGs when it comes to influencer marketing, and the proof is in the pudding. I think Revolve at most recently was valued over $2 billion on the public markets. And really, I think influencers were a huge driver of that success. Enjoy today's show, guys. Remember, tell a friend. That's the best way that you can help if you liked it.
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by Creator IQ. Here's Connor Begley.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Earned. Today I have Raissa Gerona on the show today, Chief Brand Officer at the everybody knows influencer brand Revolve. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Connor. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to finally sit down with you. I know we had to move this a few times. So I really appreciate you just thinking about me for the show and also accommodating my schedule.
No, of course. And you're the type of person that you get your schedule gets accommodated, right? So
I appreciate it.
And normally I have to make these kind of long introductions to guests to help people understand kind of who they are and what their brand is and how they contribute. But I feel like with you, it's kind of no introduction necessary.
Really? I don't know. I'm honestly flattered, but thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Well, for the few people that may not know you, right? So you've been at Revolve for, I believe, over 8 years, right?
Yes.
And during that time, when you started, it was really still pretty small. And now, I mean, it's a publicly listed stock that's, become, I think, synonymous with influencers, right? And influencer marketing. And I know that in the last year or two, you've tried to kind of accelerate other areas of the marketing funnel, but I think you were one of the originals, right? One of the real kind of pioneers in the space. So I'm really excited for today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Those are all very kind words. I think, I can't believe also how fast it's been at Revolve. It feels like it's the same thing. It's like I feel like I've been there for such a short amount of time and I've done so much, but I also feel like I've been there forever and have seen so much develop, not just of course in the retail space, obviously in the marketing space. So it's just been phenomenal to really be a part of it and also just to watch so much of it change over time.
For sure. And I think, as I think about it, we started Tribe about 11 years ago, right? Now Creator IQ. And you really got into the influencer space with Lovers and Friends, right? Before Revolve, which is probably, so we probably got into the space about the same time. So
yeah, I launched Lovers and Friends, which was, the second brand actually that I had. My first clothing brand was called Bridget Catisse, and it went underwater after 2 years of launching it in 2008 or 2007. And with Lovers and Friends, we launched it in 2010. And I think that was kind of, the very beginning of the blog sphere. I think the blogs kind of started to bubble up in 2007, 2008. So it was, again, kind of very beginning before Instagram. So we were able to use and leverage bloggers to help promote Lovers and Friends. And that was, again, the second brand that I had. And that quickly grew. And I think that was such a great case study of, how brands can be really nimble, really creative, also with having zero budget. And also just pure luck, pure luck of being a brand during a time where that space was, really kind of front and center and not all the way kind of there yet. So when people ask me about that, I'm like, I think it's really like we got so lucky. And then, when Revolve acquired, eventually we had 3 companies that Revolve acquired. That's when it was like, okay, go time, because we had that case study of like, okay, bloggers want to work with brands and they're able to promote it on their different platforms. So obviously now it feels very like, duh, like, yeah, that's what people do. But, in 2010, 2009, that just wasn't, it wasn't the most important thing by any means to any brand to market in that way.
Well, it's funny. I think you say it's duh today, but I think even a lot of the people that we talk to today, some of the largest brands, luxury brands, fast fashion brands in the world, they'll have one or two people dedicated to it, like big brands that you would know. And it's shocking, right? Like
Right.
to see the success of you guys and others I mean, like multi-billion-dollar outcomes, and still to be so underinvested. So it feels duh to you, but it's still not duh to everybody. Not in
Yeah,
the same way. Not in the same
yeah,
way.
you know what? You're right. I should actually like take that back. I was at dinner last night with actually Michael, who's the co-founder, co-CEO of Revolve, and then Mitch Mosley. So the three of us, along with another person, Candice, actually started Lovers and Friends and the two other brands. And we were having dinner with a woman named Jenny, who was from the private equity firm that invested in Revolve. So we were just kind of like, wanted to see each other after, a long time. But she was reminiscing about how in 2019, when we were on the road to take the company public, that she distinctly remembers one of the questions that the investors asked, which was, can you please explain like influencer marketing? And, this was in 2019. This was 3 years ago.
Not
That,
that long ago.
not that long ago, that somebody, or actually, again, when we were on, you're right with that comment of I shouldn't be saying like duh, because just 3 years ago, that was really my primary purpose, was to educate investors on influencer marketing and the way it works, like for the fundamentals of it. And then, of course, getting more granular of like the, posts and what does it really work, and top of funnel marketing, and, the payment structure, all these things. But I think just even the general idea of how it works and why it's important was absolutely the number one question I got in 2019. And I
Yeah,
was
and
reminded that last night. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That was like it felt like so long ago, but it really wasn't.
no, and those investors, right? They're not thinking about it every day like you are, like I am. And so for them, they've probably had a discussion around it two or three times in the last 3 years. So it's still not something that they like understand kind of deeply in their bones. Like, oh, there's a brand that does it that's been really successful, but like, does it mean it's supposed to be done everywhere? At what scale? All these questions. And so, yeah, I think you guys are still, and going back to your "we got lucky" comment, I think, everybody had access to the same information back then, right? So like
True.
everybody knew.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we had that. Yeah, I guess the same kind of playing field in a way of having access to that same information, but it is kind of also instinct, of course. And I think having really great partners that are very open minded, I always also think that that's essential in a business. I think sometimes somebody might be a trailblazer, but there's just so much red tape to get things done. So it's really hard to move the needle when you have someone that's forward thinking, but the rest of the organization is not as collaborative or more skeptical or just very set in their ways. I think that's one thing that I definitely give Revolve and its leadership team so much credit, because it's not just about the marketing. I really think that being digitally native, that launched almost 20 years ago. 20 years will be next year, which is crazy also. Like that mentality. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. That mentality is so it's so alive in the company, and that's honestly why I love being a part of it. Is, again, it's beyond marketing, but just operations, or just like how to expand globally, just really thinking about how to put more independent brands on the website. I think it's just really nimble and open thinkers in that way, and I love it.
Yeah, no. I think having that kind of alignment at an executive level, especially over such a long period of time, and, buy-in, right? Like, because there are signals, right? Like we help to provide signals, other people help to provide signals that you're working, that influencer marketing is working, but it's very hard to connect directly, like this Instagram post to how much value it got for you, right? Like that's a very tough thing to do. So to have a CFO, a CEO, or co-CEOs that are supportive of something that's not necessarily perfect. Like it's not like an Instagram ad where you go, "Oh, I ran this ad and it generated X dollars." Like that's tough to come by for sure.
For sure. And I think that's one of the things that I try to remind other marketers that ask if, is influencer marketing worth it? Is influencer marketing, an investment that we should be really looking at? And I think what a lot of people forget is that, or not forget, maybe like their approach is not what it should be, is that they want
Mhm.
to equate every single post to drive revenue or a sale.
Yes.
And I think
Yep.
that that's just fundamentally from the start a wrong way to look at it. I think it's absolutely top of funnel marketing. And there's also different people that can do different things. I really look at, a post as a billboard. And I think like if you post a billboard, you can't go to the advertiser and say, how much did I convert from this? It's all very high level, like impressions, right? And what's the
Yep.
CPM on that? And so I think for us, like that was one of the things that we got, just the fundamentals of what influencers can do, I think has been such a what we kind of got right, I guess, is that, hey, like let's try to broadcast what the brand is about and then see what happens. And also the see what happens is not just one post. It's taken a long time to really figure out what that is. And then of course now there's so many different tools, whether it's, of course before we tried tribe dynamics of what is the EMV on something to, of course, impressions and traffic. But now, of course, we can track better on sales. But I think, approaching it from that perspective from the start is the wrong way. I think is not the right approach.
Yeah, and a lot of people have done that, right? And I don't think it doesn't work. And like, oh, it's influencer don't work, right? Now, I do want to get into your background, so I want to hop back there in a second, but I want to dive into one other kind of topic there that you're talking about, which is over the last, call it year and a half, 2 years, you obviously have the kind of creator influencer engine going, right?
Right.
But it seems like you've started to invest kind of more heavily in the kind of customer marketing, in marketing your partners, right? The brands that are on Revolve, which I think, you've got close to 1,000 brands and the vast majority of them are small independent brands.
Right.
What was the thinking behind investing in those activities, while the influencer engine is still kind of running?
Yeah, I mean, I think, after our first like true influencer partnership was in 2013.
Hmm.
That's when we first did a Revolve around the world trip, and really kind of kicked things off, in a big way where there was, figuring out which influencers to work with, et cetera. So it has been, a while. It's been like 10 years, right? And so I think for us, like really figuring out that we need to continue to connect with our consumer is, first and foremost. And I think being in the pandemic, it really opened my eyes that like we were so event and influencer driven, which is amazing. And it's always going to be a part of our strategy. But to be a little bit more diverse, especially when you're, told to stay home and you can't do anything, like how else could we, yeah, like how else could we message what the brand is about without having these kind of events and trips that we're known for? And so that was very eye opening for me as a marketer to figure out strategy that's, what I guess I'm calling like just at home evergreen, and then also kind of the program that we've been running with influencers. So that was kind of just we have to figure this out because we had no choice during the pandemic, but it was also such a great lesson and a blessing because we were able to build out that program pretty significantly. And then knowing that we can always pull the lever when we're able to travel again and do these things. And then on the brand side, I felt like that was, again, another lever that hasn't been really pulled in a long time because we have been so influencer focused, that
Hmm.
people forget that we're a retailer. I think, I'm really happy that people think about Revolve as a true brand. But with that, they think almost that it's a mono brand, that
Yep.
it's one brand, but it's not. Like you said, there's 1,000, sometimes 1,200 brands on the website. Close to 80% of them are owned by, females, small businesses, or, young designers from all over the world. And I think that we need to be able to tell that story significantly more because these products, they're really hard to find, which is another kind of pillar of Revolves aside from influencers, that we carry so many brands that you can't really find anywhere else. Our buyers do such a phenomenal job scouring the internet and of course like going on these appointments to find the best products for our customers. And so that was just a big part that I think has been missing because we've been so influencer focused. So that's really been my goal the last couple of years, is to tell a more holistic story about Revolve, and to also really set us apart from a lot of the digitally native guys, a lot of DTC brands that came up in the last couple of years. That Revolve is, one, not a mono brand. Two, it's so robust in the product offering. And three, there's so many more ways that we can connect to the consumer aside from just, these trips, events, and influencers.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've also done a lot of the more traditional fashion, right? Fashion events, right? Like the
Yeah.
Met Gala, Fashion Week. How is that?
Yeah.
Is it weird to kind of, because at first I feel like influencers were shunned from those events, and you guys obviously were kind of counterculture, right? Like you went against that grain. Is it weird now to kind of come back full circle on it?
It is. But it's also like, again, comes back to just like, how do we set ourselves apart? How do we keep the brand aspirational? And I think that, seeing so many companies, which is so amazing for the influencer economy, right? To use influencers in every single segment, whether it's obviously fashion, beauty, cars, home. I mean, like you name it. I think a lot of brands are working with influencers. It was important for us to also pivot and say like, hey, yes, there's a ton of influencers that you can work with, but it's really also a whole other set of activities that you have to do to be like a true kind of fashion brand. And that's fundamentally what I always like think about when I go to bed and wake up, is like, how do we stay relevant? How do we stay aspirational? How do we stay a lifestyle brand? Because that was always the goal from the beginning, right? And so I think being integrated into, all the segments of of fashion, whether it's, the Met or New York Fashion Week or Coachella or, obviously social media, is just, it's table stakes for any brand. And so for us, it's like we have to be everywhere. And that's what's really stressful, honestly. Not only do you have to be everywhere, you have to be good at everything. You have to be good on TikTok. You have to be good at, on Instagram. You have to be good at influencer marketing. You have to be good at your strategy. I mean, I could go on and on. Like, you have to be good at everything to be relevant to the consumer, because they have so many choices. You know what I mean? They
Yeah,
have so
yeah.
many options. And I think for us, like, what I do is very, and what the team does, it's very like, you know, it's what you see. But the other part that's like not sexy and like not as cool, but I think is so cool, is just like fundamentals of our business, whether it's the free return and free shipping. Like, I always
Mhm.
get like, literally I get stopped on the street and people are like, Revolve has the best shipping ever. Like, I had it take and I got it the very next day. Like, those are things that I think people forget, that is, again, makes the brand what it is. Because you could have a really cool brand and like do the Met, but like if you don't have the fundamentals, whether of course it's, your margin structure or like just the operations on the shipping and returns, like it kind of falls apart. So I think that's what, again, I think what makes the brand so cool is that we can be like the flashy side and go to the Met, but also make sure that the customers are getting their packages and the
Yeah.
business is successful. You know what I mean? Like, these are just like,
I mean, make the you want the trains to run on time, right? Like you got to make sure.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. It's like, so there's so many different boxes to check off to make that train like run. And my job and the brand marketing team's job is very, of course, like, again, out there, and it's so tangible. You see it on Instagram, you see it on your social, you see it at, in Vogue or whatever. But again, at the end of the day, it's like, it wouldn't be running without all these other kind of parts that I take so much pride in.
Yeah,
I have to
100%.
like give them a shout out. I'm like, shipping and handling, a check. Make sure we're profitable. That's
Well,
important.
for apparel brands, right? Like returns are much higher than other categories. So like if if you don't have that figured out, it can kill your company, right? Like you can't, just it cuts so much into your margins.
Absolutely, yeah. And I, for ever since the beginning, again, back in 2003 when Mike and Michael started the company, fundamentally they believe that, you know, your home is your dressing room. And that, again, now it's like it's table stakes. But in 2003, that, just thinking about ordering jeans on a website that you didn't even really know, putting in your credit card, like, felt very, very scary. You know what I mean? And so in order to like make people feel comfortable, that was just a service that was provided from the beginning of the business. And so you're right. It is really, it's tough. All apparel is, you know, you have to try things on. And I always say to the team, like, it's like when you go to a store, like when you go to Zara, you take 10 things in there. Seldom do you buy all 10 things.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like the same exact kind of thought process when you also order online. So for us, it's obviously baked into to our margins, and we have to. And I think it's one part of what makes Revolve also very special. And, you know, to the customer, it's like it's reliable in that way. And I'm very, very proud of that.
Totally. And those are, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about what was going on in 2003. Like that was pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter, pre-Instagram, like
I mean,
it's nuts.
everything. It's not,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I'm like, but yeah, it's that. It's like really being like, is this gonna work? Are people gonna buy clothes online or anything online? But clothes is like so crazy. And again, now it's like we don't even think about it. But that's just been, again, part of the business, like, you know, from the start. And it's crazy to see how much it's evolved for 20 years. In 20 years, it's nuts.
Yeah. Well, let's actually go back 20 years or even further, right? So I want to go back into your background because I think what people really underestimate. I remember I have a friend who runs a very successful restaurant now, and he's been doing it for like a decade, right? And he's like, you know, he comes to me and he's all excited. He's like, man, I've figured out how to increase the yield. He makes, if you search for margaritas in the Bay Area, he's the number one result, makes this killer Mexican restaurant. And he's been making margaritas since, you know, we were in college together. He was my roommate. And he's like, yeah, I figured out how to increase the yield of limes by like 20x. He's like, you get the lime juice out, and then you take the skins, you apply this acid, it does this. He's like, I've done taste tests, I've done this, I've done that. And it's like, you know, and that's to eke out like an extra few percentage points, right, of margin on that thing. And I feel like those are the kind of hard won victories that take a really long time, but ultimately lead to a brand like Revolve, right? So I want to go through your background because I think that kind of resilience over time is pretty wild, right? And why don't you I've got the story here. Why don't you tell the story of like, you know, you were going to be an attorney and then you decided to not be an attorney. Then you were in a sales job, and then tell that whole story for people so they can hear it.
Yeah. So I went to UC Irvine and was studying law, and was very motivated. I don't know why. Now it's like I laugh, but I was very motivated to graduate as fast as possible. Like I was just like, I need to get out of college. I need to like make money. I want to have this type of car. It was, you know, it was very, it's funny, but that really allowed me to work very, very hard.
Yep.
I did graduate a little bit early. I got into, you know, took my LSATs and everything. And then my last year, I mean, I basically was done. So I was like, you know, I'm just going to I'm going to study abroad for a quarter and then be like off the next quarter and just going to walk on stage and just graduate. And so, of course, like studying in Italy, it's like so quintessential. Like, you know, I had like my moment studying abroad. That's really what happened. Okay. I was like, I was sitting there and I was just like, man, people here take siestas and stuff. Like, what's happening? You know, I'd never been abroad in my whole entire life. Like I was born in the Philippines, but beyond the Philippines, I'd never gone out of the country ever since moving to America when I was 7. So going to Europe as like a 19 or 20-year-old, I was absolutely blown away. Like, just the beauty of it, just the lifestyle, everything. Anyway, I ended up telling my parents when I was studying abroad that I wasn't going to be a lawyer, and they were absolutely devastated. And the first thing my dad says was like, what about my investment? Like, I put you through college. Now what are you going to do? You know? And so it was stressful for all of us because I didn't know what I was going to do. But the you know, call it the third or fourth thing that they said was like, listen, when you come back, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to make your own money, because the deal was you're going to go to law school. And now that you're not, like, you're going to have to basically like make a living. So I came back, I graduated college, super stressed, did not know what to do, but I immediately got a sales job, and I went into sales because my dad was in pharmaceutical sales. And so I was like, dad like makes like pretty okay money. He has his own schedule. He's like in outside sales. And so I was like, you know what,
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
I could like do this. And it was not in pharmaceutical sales. I was selling uniform rental basically. And I would have to go to like, blue collar jobs, people that wore uniforms that they needed basically a laundry service. That's really what I was doing. And I learned so much in such a short amount of time. I was 21 doing this. And one, like you had to control your own schedule. So I would only go into the office once a week. You would have to manage your territory, which is like the area that you were designated to sell. And
Yep.
then I made basically like $20,000 or something in my like guaranteed salary, and then everything was based on commission. And so that was such an important experience now, again, looking back, because it really was kind of like business 101 on being an entrepreneur. Even though I had like insurance and somebody paying me guaranteed $20,000, I was able to learn, pretty quickly how to close deals, how to put together deals, how to
Yep.
present, how to, what happens when I'm lazy, which is I get no deals done and I have no commission. And so it was kind of like this very like a very quick way for me to learn like, oh, this is how it is to kind of work for yourself. And because of that, it really, I think, fueled my desire, honestly, to work for myself, which is exactly what I did. So while I
Yep.
had that job, I started my first brand, and I would just sell, basically like remade vintage clothing on eBay. And
Hmm.
that business, started to do really, really well. I ended up quitting my job. I launched that vintage remake brand, and Revolve was like was my customer. That's how I met Michael. That's how I met, really the whole Revolve company, because they bought my brand. And yeah, and so that was in 2007, and did that for about 2 years. And then in 2008, as you know, was the Great Recession. Ran out of money very quickly, and had to close the business in 2009. And that's when Michael asked to basically, hey, I don't really know you. Seems like you're a hardworking person. Do you want to like do a brand together? And he was like, I will fund everything, but you have to do everything. And to me, that was just like the biggest lotto ticket. Like it was like a winning ticket. I'm like, yeah, I'll do like, great. Just because I had another brand close, I can do this. And I literally did everything. I designed, I did tech packs. I sold it to showrooms. I did the marketing. I would pack the box and send it to the boutiques. Because we also sold Lovers and Friends in other stores, not just Revolve. And again, it was kind of like the part two of my of business school. The part one was going to having that sales job. Part two was now, I would say, part 2B. Part two was having the first company that failed, and then now having this company that I really did like everything from start to finish, and I learned so much in such a short amount of time, and then built that up. And then in 2014, ultimately sold it to Revolve, which was amazing.
Yep.
And that's how I was able to get a tiny bit of equity in the company, and like really learn the process of selling a business, valuing things, and that really was life changing in every way.
Yeah, the Michael role in there, Michael Mente, is fascinating to me that he would be willing to write that check, hardly knowing you, right, or just knowing you a little bit. Is that something he does regularly? Like, maybe talk a little bit more about him too. It seems like he's played a pretty big role in your life. Obviously, both Michaels, I'm sure, have. But
Yeah.
yeah, talk about him a little bit.
So I met Michael in 2008, when they were buying my first brand, Bridget Catisse, that went out of business. And I always knew that he was kind of a special person, because he's in online retail, which at the time, again, there were not that many.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of always was like, okay, he's like always kind of down to try something new. And then when he wanted to do a brand with me, I was absolutely, shocked that like he would, really take a risk. But also, when I think about it now, like that's probably his superpower, is to really kind of recognize people, either within the organization or people that he wants to bring in, and make sure to empower those people to help, continue the business, in whatever kind of vision that he has. And he's done that multiple times, not just with me. It's, he has great leadership in the company, and some of the people, I mean, I would say 3 or 4 of the people that I can think top of mind, like they've been at Revolve since they were an intern, and now they're like
Mm-hmm.
running big parts of the business. And so he's just been a great, he's one of my great friends, but he's also been such a great mentor to me. And to watch him also, truly, blossom as a CEO. I think at the time when they bought Lovers and Friends, Revolve was, I don't know, doing maybe like 100 million in revenue. And then we just crossed, $1 billion in revenue earlier this year. So to see that, it's amazing. Like, you're
Yeah.
like, wow, like it's like 10x in in 10 years. it's,
Yeah.
it's, it's incredible. So, yeah, he's been such an important person in my life in that way, from from a business standpoint and a mentor. And he continues to really, fascinate me about the way he thinks about the world, of course, of business. And, he's very also involved in marketing, because he thinks, he it's like Revolve is like his child, so
Yeah,
he's very,
totally.
very involved. But yeah, I've been very lucky to have people like him in my life, for sure.
Yeah. It's funny. People talk about unicorns a lot. And usually that means you're worth $1 billion. But doing $1 billion in sales is a totally different milestone. That's pretty wild.
I know. We were also just saying recently, like, man, like that happened earlier this year. I think it was in March or February or something. And we should have just had, like, that should have been a big party, because it's like, what we did, it was more like, oh wow, we like crossed 1 billion last month, like awesome, but when you're right, when you sit back and you think about that, that's insane. Like that, the company is doing over $1 billion in sales. So super proud of the entire team. And it really is like, comes back or down to Mike and Michael, who are incredible CEOs. They're super duper smart, very open. I always say that as a characteristic about both of them. Very open
Yep.
to change, very open to ideas, very open to feedback, which I think makes them, killer as CEOs. Because I think a lot of times, we get set in our ways, and that I think that's one of the things that makes them really special.
Yeah, 100%. I think if I'm doing back of the napkin math correctly, that means you're making $100,000 an hour every single hour every day for the entire year. That's a lot of money.
Gosh, okay, yeah, I did. That's absolutely right. You know what? And they deserve it for sure. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's crazy.
It's a
That's
weird
awesome.
number.
It is
It's
a
a
weird
big
number.
number.
Oh, cool though. I
So
love that.
let's talk about the scale, right? So scaling up 10x. Obviously, you had started working with influencers at Lovers and Friends, and then really kind of blew that up at Revolve, it sounds like. What was that like, kind of scaling it up, right? The scale of your guys' program in terms of working with, I mean, there's tens of thousands of influencers that create hundreds of thousands of pieces of content a year. What were some of the challenges with that scale? And then what do you think some of the mistakes are that people make, along the way, right? Like, what are the things that you're like, man, people, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, but like, just don't get this part right.
Yeah, I mean, we had so many challenges, but also I think a lot of room, because not that many people were doing it. So we couldn't really reference anybody, to be honest, of like, oh, they're doing this. This is their
Mm-hmm.
gifting program, or this is what the contract structure should be, and the deliverables. Like, it was it was like the wild, wild west. Like nobody
Yeah,
like
you're
was
making
really,
it up as you go.
oh my gosh, we're making it up as we go. Absolutely. And again, I think that's what also was the cool things about doing it during that time is that, you kind of set your own rules, not because you were trying to, do anybody wrong, but just truly nobody else was doing it. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
And at the scale that we were doing it, like first, honestly, it was just like me, that was gifting, reaching out, and then another person, and then another, and then now, there's call it like 20 people on that team,
yeah,
that
yeah,
do solely just like influencer, and brand ambassador kind of, relations. But
yeah,
that has taken a long time. We also had to build a lot of our systems internally, like, almost like a CRM for influencers that didn't exist, when we
yeah,
were starting out. So that the tech team had to build that in house so that we can track everyone's information from like their top cities to their top, from male to female, following to their shoe size. I mean, all of this stuff, like we have.
yep,
And then, recently, a year and a half ago, we launched basically our own affiliate program that has been like years in the making. We built it again internally in house. And that was really because I guess, in the beginning, it was a lot of like, okay, it's all about brand awareness and impressions, which is still very important. But a lot of the affiliate programs, they don't share with you, conversion on
yeah,
anyone.
totally,
So
totally.
it was just it's a black box. And so that was, a big, for me, I saw that as an opportunity. And so the team, it took us a while to build it. We rolled it out, like I said, a year and a half ago. And that has been incredible. I mean, we have, I think, close to 30,000 brand ambassadors who've signed up.
Yep,
And obviously they get paid commission. But that's just been so fascinating, Connor, because we have such a wider view of what each person can do. We know who obviously is like, again, great for just impressions. Then you have people that are great for driving traffic, but maybe like not the highest converters. And then you have like the unicorns that are like impressions, traffic drivers, converters. I mean, it's like, it's just like, it's incredible. And it just absolutely widened our view on like who we should be working with. And so that has definitely been transformative in our business. And then in terms of like getting it wrong, I mean, she's like, we make mistakes all the time. And I think brands also, I'm sure they feel my kind of pain too. It's like, sometimes your head is down just working, that when you lift it back up to kind of check around what's happening, you're like, oh my gosh, I missed this, or we should have done this, And I don't think any of it is intentional. I think we're all just trying to figure it out, and that like this is a completely new space still. I mean, and every day, like for instance, in 19 TikTok launched, that is also kind of in a way a wild, wild west, right? Because the platform is so different. There's so many different types of creators on the platform. The price point is different for each creator. So that then again, that's something that we have to learn again. You know what I mean? It's like you have to learn something new every single time. So I think for, again, in terms of mistakes or like lessons learned, it's like you just have to be on it and just learning as much as possible all the time, because any platform can kind of just come to fruition. And I think there's big, I mean, truly, and there's such a big benefit to be an early adopter. Obviously
yeah,
there's risk because you're trying to figure it out. But if you're on TikTok from the start, like obviously, Charlie D'Amelio, then you have hundreds of millions of followers. And I think brands were a little bit late. Like I feel like we were late to TikTok. And that was a missed opportunity. I mean, now I think we're getting in our groove, but that took a while to really like figure out and pivot. And there's so many more like examples that I can give in terms of like all the things that I think we could be doing, or, in terms of brands, it's like, I really only just kind of, to be honest, like look at Revolve, because I'm very like, that's just like what I live and breathe. But,
yeah.
but there's so much. And I think another kind of missed opportunity, or not, I shouldn't say missed opportunity, but one thing that I'm constantly trying to work on is just having content housed on our platform and on the website, because you're really at the mercy of all of these, the algorithms, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, like anything can change at any given moment. And so to me, it's like you have to build, your platform on so many different platforms, but I think it's also become very important to have it on your own website or what app, whatever you have, because it is a risk that I'm sure we all have experienced.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Shein, I think, has pushed their own kind of app really aggressively. Yeah, you want to make sure you own those channels if you can. So quick question. So yeah, two more questions, and then we're going to do one fun end of show question.
Okay.
So, obviously you guys took the company public, and now you've been a public company for, I think, a couple of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the challenges? Because, I think that's an ambition of our company, right? To get to that
Right.
point. And so what are some of the challenges of being, at a public company versus a private company? Or has it been pretty much the same?
I mean, from the marketing side, it's pretty much the same. I
Yep.
mean, no, actually, no. It's just, you're scrutinized, all the
Yep.
time, and everything, you have to really think about everything over and over again to make sure that, you know, there's, it's not going to be a liability on, your investors. And I think reporting every quarter is also, I mean, I think to me, it's like, it's just like a report card every quarter of like how you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're getting graded on it, like truly on your stock. And so that's sometimes could be stressful. And to be honest, in the beginning, I would check the stock like every day. I'd be like, what's
Yeah.
this, because that's just what you start to think about. But,
And the whole company's probably doing that, right? All the employees, and like probably not as much as you, but they like check in, they look at it, etc.
et cetera. Exactly. But I think what's been great too, again, and going back to just like, the leadership team being in sync is like taking, 3 steps back and saying like, we're in this for the long term. And like, yes, you're getting great, you have to report on a quarterly basis, but we have aspirations to be a really, really large company. So like, let's keep our eyes on that prize. And, of course we have to continue to maintain the business, but that's what we have to work towards. But that took me, and I think a few people in the company, a while to really get in that zone, because I was so like just obsessed about the quarter and like the stock price and like what are people, what are other kind of retailers reporting during this quarter. Then you're constantly comparing yourself also, which is good. But I have learned to, focus on the brand, continue to do what we're doing right, learn from the mistakes, and continue to, keep our eye on that like kind of 5-10 year trajectory.
Yeah, well, there's still opportunity to 10x or more, right? So, I
Yeah.
remember looking at it. It was like crazy because I think, Fashion Nova is in the billions of revenue, right? And I was like, they're like, well, how much more room is there to go? I'm like, well, let's look at it. I'm like, how big is Zara? I'm like, I think Zara is doing 30 to 35 billion dollars in revenue. It's like, so you could get to 35 times your current size and still not be the biggest. There's still bigger brands than that. So it's
Exactly.
there's a lot of room up, right?
I love it.
Okay. So let's do one last question before the fun end of show question,
Okay.
which I'm kind of forgetting. I had it. I got to remember it. So I like to kind of have it come as we go. So you recently celebrated your 40th birthday, and I think you mentioned online that in your 30s, sold 2 businesses, built a global brand, took it public, became a mom, all that stuff, right? So and I personally really like to think in decades, right? I think when you think in years, like the phrase I really liked is, people overestimate what they can do in a year, but underestimate what they can do in a decade. So for you, what is the next kind of, yeah, it's a great one. Because again, it's like, oh, wow, what could I do in 10 years? Like that's a big chunk of time, right? So for you, what does the next decade hold? What are you hoping to accomplish?
To be honest, I'm like not 100% sure yet. That's been top of mind for me for like the last year, because knowing that I was turning 40 and kind of trying to plot out what I want to do for the next 10 years. But it's just exciting to me because I feel like I'm just you know, in this very different time in my life where I have access to, not, of course, we all have access to so much information, but just people and like, you know, people that I want to meet and different types of businesses. And so it's, I almost feel like it's very, again, very cheesy, but it feels like the possibilities are endless.
Yep.
I obviously have so much, you know, aspiration for the brand to continue to grow. And I definitely think we're, you know, we're in that direction. But for me personally, you know, how can I be more effective potentially in other businesses, whether it's, of course, being an advisor or board member or consulting, et cetera, and just kind of use all this experience that I've, you know, I really worked hard for to gain and have failed so many times. Like, how can I really use that to my benefit? I haven't completely figured it out. So that's, I'll come back to you on that hopefully here. But I would say the last thing would be to just, I've been really eager to give back in some ways, whether it's, you know, mentoring, you know, young people, or really just giving my time and being involved in organizations, nonprofit organizations. So that's something that I definitely am putting things in motion. And that really just, again, stems from like, wow, you've been able to do so much in 10 years, and you're in a position to really, you know, help people out just with like, again, so many failed experiences, and how can I give back? So that's something that's been top of mind and very important to me.
100%. Yeah, I think it's one of the bigger misunderstandings when it comes to entrepreneurship, which you didn't mention, but you know, people assume that all the best companies are started by people in their 20s, and it's like, no, the success rates actually go up as you get older. So it goes up all the way until you're like mid to late 60s, 70s. Like, you get more and more successful, right? Because like, you know, people, you know how to do things, you got access to capital, you got all these things that you didn't have when you were in your early 20s.
Exactly.
Addition,
And that's what's so exciting, you know, and that's why I'm like, I don't know, because I feel like there's so many different paths to take, and all the things that you just listed are all the things that I think about, of like, wow, you could really like do anything.
yeah.
I mean, I know, again, it sounds very cheesy, and I'm not saying like I could do everything, but it's more just like, you know, take a moment, take a beat, and just figure out what you really kind of want to do, because there's a good chance that you can get it done. So that's what's been very exciting for me.
100%. All right, well, let's do one fun end of show question. So,
Okay.
what was the biggest, and you can leave names out, the biggest revolve around the world fail? What was the one where like things just didn't go, something broke, somebody got lost, luggage was burned, something like that?
I mean, there's so many, honestly. There's so many failed revolve around the world, because you're dealing with so many different personalities. And so something that might not be as important to one person could be, you know, very significant to another. And that's another thing that I like really try to, I've learned, honestly, doing the trips, is like, I have no idea what these people are going through at the end of the day, whether it's people that I'm traveling with, or people that I'm working with, or just people that I come across with at, you know, at the grocery store. And to just have a little bit more kind of empathy and not judge them for, you know, if they're crying over something that I think is like a non-issue. I'm like, you know what? I have no idea. Maybe like other things happened the day before that, you know, is not being shared with me, and I don't want to make my assumption on such a small kind of you know, instance. But gosh, we've had so many, Connor. I mean, from, of course, lost luggages is always like a 911 situation. You know, boyfriend breakup. You know, a boy fighting during, like, you know, there, all of this stuff. I mean, when I say we could have had the best reality show, we could have had the best reality show. But you know, and also
There's still a chance. You
yeah,
got a
there's
long ways to go.
trust me, like, we've been asked, and I'm like, I would never do that to the influencers, my team, or the brand. But yeah, it's been such a wild ride, and like, literally, and you know, I feel very, very lucky to have experienced all of it, even if, you know, I have people crying about lost luggage. It's been an incredible ride.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, I really appreciate you taking out the time. I'm glad we finally got to make this happen. And again, congrats on the last 10x, and here's to the next 10x over the next decade. And yeah, excited to watch you guys continue to kill it and innovate.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for your time.
Of course. All right. Bye, Raissa.
Bye.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by Creator IQ. Creator IQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at creatoriq.com.